Welcome, everyone, to our first Center for Business Law event of the semester. Very exciting. Today's event is the AI transition, rethinking corporate law in the digital era. And we've got a panel of 3 people today, and 2 of them are online. One of them is in person, so I will join Sabrina here in person. And hopefully this works for everyone online. But let me just give some very brief introductions, and then our panelists can say more about themselves if they'd like. So first off, I'd like to thank Jan Lee, who is the business manager of vLaw, and she helped organize this event. So she is not one of the panelists, but she is online, and she may be able to chime in during the Q&A at the end. So thank you again, Jan. And now I'll introduce our 3 panelists. So Gerald Casely is a lawyer formerly of Gowling WLG and currently the co-founder of Tier Legal Inc., which has developed Corpus, a legal AI tool enabling law firms and legal professionals to productize themselves and create scale and efficiency in their work, thereby enabling them to create the culture, life, and business they wish to have. Sabrina Chang, seated beside me, is a corporate lawyer in Vancouver with a practice focused on mergers and acquisitions, capital markets, and corporate governance. She practiced as an associate at Fasken, where she provided advice on debt and equity financing, continuous disclosure obligations, and public and private M&A transactions. During her time there, she was also a part of the firm's AI pilot working group, exploring the application of AI in legal practice. Sabrina also serves on the board of the Vancouver Bar Association. Sabrina is in the midst of a career transition as she will be joining McCarthy Tétrault's business law group next month. And then finally, Nikki Kira is the managing lawyer of vLaw. With a deep passion for helping clients, he strives to make the legal process simple, accessible, and stress-free. Before joining vLaw, Nikki practiced at firms in both Victoria and mainland BC, handling a range of matters including contractual, property, and family disputes. He has represented clients in both the BC Provincial Court and Supreme Court, always aiming to deliver practical, solution-focused advice. So again, the topic for today is the AI transition in corporate law. And the way this is going to be structured is I'm going to sort of ask a series of questions of each of our 3 panelists kind of in turn. So we'll sort of go through the 3 panelists one by one. But all 3 panelists are welcome to chime in and answer any particular question. So don't feel like you're not allowed to talk while we're focusing on another panelist. So we're going to start with Gerald. And Gerald, I guess I would ask you to maybe provide some more introduction to yourself and your practice if you'd like. But more specifically, I would like to ask you to briefly describe the value proposition of your product.
Yeah, certainly, I'd be happy to. Can you hear me all right, Canada?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. So yeah, essentially, my background, I guess, ties into the value proposition of the product as well. Essentially, spent a number of years practicing corporate commercial law, specifically with technology companies, and within AI specifically with a number of industry leaders. And whenever ChatGPT came around, I think much like a lot of us, it captured my imagination. And I started looking for a tool that could effectively enable me to help with the drafting of documents at a large corporate firm like Gowling's. And what I found is that at the time, there were no tools out there that would enable me to essentially use the firm's templates, apply my learned knowledge over time, and have the AI answer the questions and fill out the documents the way that I would fill out those documents. And so I had reached out to some past colleagues that worked at AI companies, and they mentioned that this is definitely possible. So we got together to put together a tool effectively where a law firm can leverage their own templates and they can train the AI to answer the decisions exactly how they would answer those decisions. So effectively what we're doing is enabling the expertise within a law firm to very seamlessly scale throughout that law firm. So for example, if I were a junior associate, I would have access to the most senior lawyer's expertise in a given field if I had access to their corpus trained AI tool. So effectively, that's what we're doing.
Could you give us a real life example of like a use case of your product?
Definitely. So I mean, it works very well with corporate law generally. There's a number of other areas of law that it works well with, effectively, so long as the lawyer has a template and a reasonable rationale for the way that they complete that template, we'll be able to help out. But the concrete real world example could be an M&A transaction or an equity financing transaction. So, for example, there are the CVCA documents online that are commonly used in equity financing transactions. And basically, what our tool does is essentially enables the lawyer to complete all of those documents based on their specific knowledge and their specific preferences. So, if they feel as though certain components within those documents, is within market or outside of market, or if, for example, they're drafting on behalf of the company, they may change the way that they draft those documents versus if they're essentially representing the investor, they may complete the documents differently. And our tool enables them to essentially apply all that logic instantaneously. So essentially, if you were to enter into an equity financing transaction as a lawyer, what you could do is once the term sheet is complete, you upload the term sheet into Corpus and it drafts all the documents you need for that given equity financing transaction in about 90 seconds. And then effectively what you would do as the lawyer is you would download those documents, you review them in Word, and you see all the red lines. And all those red lines are reflective of the decisions that the AI has made. So effectively, that's the tool in the real world example.
Are there any legal or business issues that your tool catches that human beings sometimes miss?
I think it depends to some degree. I mean, it depends on who the human being is. If it is the most senior lawyer at the firm, presumably that lawyer is probably going to do a better job. But if, for example, it is a junior clerk, then the AI is presumably going to do a better job. And one real life example is we recently onboarded a client, and just for kind of a test on ROI, we put together a very simple convertible note package and had lawyers do that manually. Junior lawyers do that manually first. And then we essentially trained our AI to do it. And we reduced the time spent drafting by 99% and the error rate by 90%. So there is a benefit there. And then a lot of people are concerned, okay, well, all the jobs may be taken away. And I'm here to kind of reassure everybody that that is certainly not the case. Like the firms that we are working with are training the AI tool, which is empowering kind of the junior associates. And it frees up a lot of time. And that time is now spent doing more in-depth training and more discussions about the documents as opposed to the time spent administratively creating the documents. So that is kind of the business or legal issue that may occur, right? So if somebody is very junior and they use Corpus without validating that, there may be an issue from a legal perspective, much like you see in the media. So we're in no way replacing the human by any means. We're just allowing them to do the administrative portion a lot quicker, effectively. So the legal issue would be, if the drafter kind of overlooked all of the components, did not review that final draft and submitted it, there could very well be some legal issues in there because ultimately the AI is not a lawyer, although it is trained based on a lawyer's knowledge. So that is kind of a legal issue and a legal concern. And the business concern related to the tool that I'm having a lot of discussions with innovation teams is, what is the revenue model now associated with it, given that the billable hour is theoretically reduced. And we're having a lot of discussions around that. There are a bunch of theses right now that are being explored. Some firms are exploring a higher billable hour to the extent that they use AI. That's somewhat challenging because clients may perceive the billable hour to be already, quite high. And then the other option is now that you can produce documents in a reliable manner with less time, there's the option to create fixed billing around a specific project. And it enables the firm to potentially do more transactions or reduce that cost associated with the creation of the documents. But the business issue that arises from that is, what does that revenue model look like and how does that transition work? So, a complex M&A transaction, it would be very challenging right now to create a fixed fee associated with that. So, M&A transactions, the AI tools are very much supportive of that. And then a more simple, convertible note, like I discussed earlier, the AI tool can do more of a lift and create more of the value there. Having said that, you're still going to spend your time discussing the relevant items with the founder. And in that particular instance, the founder may not have as much by way of funding to pay legal bills. So they are generally, the thesis anyway is that they're more satisfied in that outcome effectively. So what we're trying to do is really get rid of that administrative burden and allow lawyers to really focus on the high value work that, I don't want to speak for every lawyer, and I welcome the other lawyers on the panel's thoughts on this, but I really enjoy the client interaction and the advice piece, and not so much the administration of creating the documents. So for me, it was almost creating a tool that makes my work as a lawyer a lot more fulfilling personally.
Okay, sort of relatedly, I guess either in the context of your company's product or just more broadly, what corporate legal tasks do you think are most amenable to the use of AI, and what legal tasks are least amenable to the use of AI?
It's a great question, and I might be long-winded in my answer. So by all means, cut me off if you need to. But I think it's very nuanced. So I've read a number of studies, and general AI tools like ChatGPT do a great job at certain things. And what those things are effectively helping the lawyer brainstorm different concepts, what may or may not be reasonable in the market. It may help drafting a single provision or providing the various options that may be available for that specific provision. So generally, AI tools are quite good for that. As a junior lawyer, I would encourage all junior lawyers to use AI to try to better understand concepts, with the caveat that AI does hallucinate. It has gotten significantly better in the last 12 months, but you have to appreciate that may be the case, which means that anything that is being relied upon, it's very important to validate that information that you had received is accurate. But it can give you a general holistic viewpoint on a matter that you're not necessarily familiar with, so that you can speak to that a little bit more, in a way that's a little more sophisticated than you otherwise could. Of course, certainly don't want to replace the time with the senior lawyers or senior partners that you have the opportunity to discuss that with, because that will ultimately be incredibly valuable, not only from an information and education perspective, but also from a personal development perspective. And as a result, I think as lawyers, we want to make sure that we don't lose the sight of that piece of it all. At the end of the day, we're people dealing with people, and that's why I think AI will not replace legal advisors, but it will change the way that we do our work. So that's the general tools. And then there are more legal specific tools that are good for commercial work. And again, they're great for ideation and administration, but I wouldn't necessarily rely on them without validating. So, for example, Spellbook or other tools have an integrated Word version that enable you to speak to a AI user interface, and then it will redline and comment the document based on your instructions. So whenever I use these, it's helpful to get a lay of the land and better understand the context and situation and what's in the document. But at the same time, if I am very experienced in a specific vertical and I have like a predetermined preference, sometimes it takes longer working with the AI than it would if I did it myself. So you kind of have to appreciate those components. And then I would say that there's kind of this third category of tool, which is Corpus, where we're essentially enabling lawyers to scale their own knowledge. We're training the AI based on the specific knowledge. And that particular use of AI is very good for corporate transactions, where effectively there are a number of documents that may not be highly negotiated, or they may be highly negotiated, but you have to appreciate that tool is going to provide you a good first draft, and then it's the lawyer's job to take it from there effectively. So I think that those are kind of the three most effective ways to use AI to produce output. And then there are some other very interesting tools out there that will essentially listen to your calls and automatically create draft emails and help create workflow automations that I personally find very helpful as a lawyer, and not just a startup founder. So I guess I'll pause there.
Yeah, and I guess I would maybe exercise my prerogative as the director of the Center for Business Law, and also a law professor, and just kind of interject maybe my own experience. So I've demoed a number of tools for use in transactional drafting, and I've been very impressed. I thought that they were very powerful, and I was kind of like remembering my days as an associate at a law firm, and I was like, man, I wish, like they seemed like they would be really useful, like
Hmm.
surprisingly so. I was surprised, and I guess I would say, I'm no longer a practicing lawyer, but I am, I'm a legal academic, so I do legal research. I have found that kind of, out of the box AI tools like ChatGPT, for example. My experience with them is a tool for legal research, which is not something, if you go on and become corporate lawyers, you frankly will not be doing much legal research per se, but certainly as a litigator you would. I found them to be very unreliable for doing substantive legal research and basically to be avoided. But as you said, they're getting better and maybe they will get better yet. But I've kind of had mixed experience, and to my surprise, I found that AI tools seem like they're actually more useful for transactional work than they would be for like substantive legal research, which you would be doing in litigation. So that's kind of my 2 cents. So the final prepared question I have, you've already answered this like multiple times, but I'm just going to ask you again because I'm sure it's the question that people in the room are sort of the most concerned about. Do you think AI tools will replace lawyers? That's the question. Yes or no?
I appreciate that, Ken. And I'll jump into that. But first, I guess I would say that I want to preface it with, yeah, I've never done litigation, and research is generally not something that I dive deeply into. And I agree I've heard they're unreliable, and I'm aware of some colleagues that have used them in tax and some mixed reviews there as well, in the sense that, it gives you an idea of the landscape, but you really got to dive into that tax act to figure it out.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Okay.
no,
I agree.
I'm with you there for sure. Um, yeah. So will AI tools replace legal advisors? I personally don't think so. So I work very closely with a medical AI company, and they've been training um, AI to essentially provide outputs for radiologists for over 10 years now. From a historical context, the AI as it relates to image recognition is much more developed than it is in large language models. And how that's permeated through the business culture is a lot more developed. And, we're certainly not seeing any radiologists being replaced, but rather their output and their workflow is a lot quicker, a lot more reasonable. Their lives seem to be a little bit more balanced as well. But ultimately, at the end of the day, whenever you're going in for a very important decision, like what is going on with your heart, you need that human connection, not only for that piece of it, but also you want to know that that individual is experienced and they have been dealing with that particular subject matter for a long time. And if you're not, intimately familiar with using the AI tool, you're certainly not going to be able to trust it with a decision of that magnitude. And I would consider legal work to be very similar. I mean, there may be certain legal tasks that perhaps business leaders would be on the fence about reaching out to a lawyer before, and now they're using ChatGPT to better understand that and getting more comfort. And maybe they aren't reaching out to lawyers about that. But nevertheless, to the extent that there's any material business item that they would have reached out to a lawyer before, my experience in practice has been that they are still reaching out to a lawyer. So if we're dealing with a large M&A transaction, I've not met a business leader yet that's going to do that personally. And I don't think that will change in the near term. I mean, it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen in the next, 5 and 10 years, but certainly not seeing that today. And I think it depends on the legal work. Like, I think it's changing. There's this, I believe the company's called Garfield, based out of the UK, and they are providing legal services through AI exclusively. But the legal service is essentially a claim letter that they're sending to people that owe the businesses money, and it's the user's paying $2 for that letter. So it's a very different type of legal work than we would traditionally think of legal work, and whether or not legal advisors are being replaced. So I personally don't have that concern, certainly not in the near term. And I think if it happens in 10 years, there's going to be a lot of societal change, and there's going to be a lot more going on than simply the replacement of legal advisors. I think that lawyers generally, just by nature, have a curiosity to figure out what's going on, and going through law school and then practicing law helps you better understand how the business world works generally, and you can communicate that language, or that's what I've found anyway. And I think that there will always be a need for that person in the world, regardless of what their day-to-day looks like, there's going to be a need for that type of person. So I hope that answers the question sufficiently, but certainly welcome any further discussion on that.
Yeah, yeah, thank you very much. And there might be some questions at the end from students. So before I turn it over to Sabrina, I'm going to go off script a little bit and ask you another question. I noticed two motorcycle helmets behind you, and I was just wondering, do you ride or?
Oh, they're actually car racing helmets.
Oh,
So
even better. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
What
yes.
kind of car do you got?
Well, I recently had a daughter, so right now I'm rocking two SUVs.
Okay. Oh, all
But
right. All right. Yeah, let's move on. Yeah, so in my outside life, I've raced both cars and motorcycles. So,
oh
um,
no way, amazing.
anyways, enough about me. Sabrina, let's turn it over to you. Thank you for joining us in person. So you, until recently, were part of Fasken's AI working group. And I guess to the extent you're at liberty to discuss what you're doing at Fasken, can you give us some insights into what kind of discussions and initiatives are happening behind the scenes?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Before I start, can everyone hear me okay, or should I use the mic?
Uh,
We're okay?
I
Or-
think you should use the mic for
Okay.
the online
Okay,
and for the record. Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah, yeah.
I can actually hear her without the mic if that's helpful at all. But
Uh, yeah, for the recording. Yeah, just in case.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that's okay. It always feels a bit more awkward holding a microphone. So before I start, I just want to preface by saying I'm not as well versed in AI and technology as my two fellow panelists. I'm a fourth year associate, most recently at Fasken, and then transitioning to McCarthy's on October 20th. So I'll give my personal email afterwards if anyone has any questions. So when I was an associate at Fasken's, I put my hand up to be a part of our firm's AI working group. So I'll go back a little bit. So I got called to the bar in September 2022, and I believe ChatGPT surfaced in November 2022. So my time as an associate has been very, like, AI has been very involved. And when ChatGPT first came out, I remember there was a message from the firm managing partner being like, don't use this, let's make sure we protect client information. Don't use AI for legal work. And, fast forward a few weeks, that narrative really changed. And, now we want to be on the forefront because other firms are doing it, and it's not something that's going to go away. And my brother's a software engineer and he works in AI. So it was something that was on my radar early on. So when they were asking around for people to join the working group, I put my hand up. So what we essentially do is because of how many lawyers are at the firm, we get to test out products before it gets rolled out nationally. So some of before I left, the products we we're working with, Copilot is a big one. We use Lega, which is, it does, it summarizes documents, document comparisons, but it's basically like a chat GPT, but designed for lawyers or legal professionals specifically. And we were also testing out certain, software. So like DraftWise and Spellbook, those were two that were focused for like transactional work. And I don't think they decided which one they're going to roll out yet. And might be piloting a few more projects. So, yeah.
Is the push for AI, is this something that is driven more by clients or is it law firms taking the lead and implementing these tools?
I think on both sides, it's pretty even. I personally haven't encountered any clients that are like, no, like, don't use AI. It's more, inquisitory. Like, we want to know how the AI is being used. Is our information being protected? And I think we're at a place now, a few years in, where, people are aware of AI and its benefits, and the majority of people I interact with use AI. There's some lawyers still at the shop, they're like, why change things? We can do the work without AI, but I think it's slowly, the firm is also trying to slowly transition everyone to use it. I know we have we have data about like how many lawyers have used Lega, have used Copilot, and they're encouraging everyone to get on board. So I think it's driven by both sides. I work with public clients, and a lot of them are implementing AI into their software services or other aspects of, what the services they provide, and we have to prepare disclosure and like risk factors surrounding AI now. So, yeah.
Have you ever heard of clients specifically requesting or asking about the use of AI as a way to drive down fees?
You know what? I did. So the latter part of last year, I was doing an informal secondment with the company, and we had to summarize a bunch of notes from committee and board meetings. And they had just lost their legal counsel. And somebody else, was supposed to do these, but it ended up just being me who had to summarize all of them. And for the first part, they were really scared of, the sensitive information in their board meetings being just, punched through a Copilot or something like that. But then I think as time went on, they're like, you know what? We've seen other companies use it. We think it's safe enough. Why don't you give it a try? And I produced them a sample, and they're like, this is great. We're going to continue using AI going forward. So then when I'm offboarded, I think they continued using it for summarizing and other means. Yeah.
In your perspective, does AI create any ethical or professional risks for lawyers?
I think absolutely. We've, I use AI personally, but I think it's important to double check everything that comes out of it. So for example, this summer with Andre, actually, we worked on a redomicile transaction, a company from BC to Delaware. And we worked with a bunch of spreadsheets. This company had hundreds of investors, and for different tasks, we had to create different versions of spreadsheets with various data. And I think it would be impractical to do it all manually. So, sometimes we would put it through AI, and because of how fast paced it was, you might miss checking something. And then when we went back to check, we're like, oh, the data wasn't always inputted correctly. And AI can hallucinate and make up, things that weren't even there. Like AI, I think it tries to give you output that would be, what you would prefer to hear. So it's always important to double check, be transparent with your principals, the partners you're working with about the AI that you're using, that, you used AI to produce this product. And before we use it, it's always important to get clients' consent as well. That was part of the firm's internal policy. And I think that's across the board, the different firms.
Yeah, I guess I would echo that in my own kind of limited experience. Like for my research, like I've tried using AI for certain data processing tasks, for example, and I was kind of like, it was like less accurate than I would have thought. You know what I mean? It's like something that like Excel would do with zero errors, like AI would produce errors. So it's just kind of like, so I think it's a good idea. Like, unless like, in the sort of medium term horizon, 5-10 years, AI might get much better. But I think it's important if you're doing anything that requires kind of like precise reporting of information to just be a bit gun shy about, just using AI result. I think it's like really, really important to double check everything. And I've echoing what something Gerald said, like sometimes it doesn't even save time using AI because you just end up kind of checking it all yourself when you could have just done it. But anyways, so I'm gonna maybe ask you a question. This is sort of similar to some of the things that Gerald talked about, but from your perspective, how do you think that the development and improvement of AI is going to affect the business of law firms going forward?
Yeah, I think positively. I think the question is starting to transition from, will AI replace lawyers? Because I got asked that a lot from students and, junior associates, to how can we be on top of AI and how can we work more efficiently, but maintain the work quality. And I think we're, starting to get there. There are a lot of lawyers that I feel like come in and they're nervous, right, about using these new products and, what are the implications? This is, I'm not double checking every single thing and confident with the work, but I don't think AI is going to slow down. I think it's going to continue to grow and the responses that we get are going to continue to be more accurate. I feel like every month that I'm using, the different products, it's starting, the output is becoming a lot cleaner. So I think clients are going to start, being like, how does this impact the billing? I'm not involved in those conversations. It's mostly, the partners, but some of my startup clients, they want to know, what kind of systems we're using and, they learn from us too, what can we do to, elevate our business and our business offering. So it's a dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much. So why don't we move on to our final panelist, Nikki. Could you just maybe briefly reintroduce yourself and describe your practice working at a virtual law firm, right? So one of the things that we should kind of highlight here is that vLaw is a virtual platform for legal services, Nikki being the managing lawyer. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your firm's business and how it's different from a traditional law firm?
Sure. Well, so hi everyone, my name is Nikki. My law side number is 515234, and so I'm just a lawyer licensed practicing in British Columbia. The license number is just a joke that I sometimes tell people that people usually don't remember it. But the way vLaw works is it's a firm where by and large people are able to work out of their homes or location that they choose through having, I like to call it, it's a somewhat sloppy analogy, but I like to call it Shopify for lawyers. The idea is everyone familiar with Shopify? It's a platform that provides tools for people who want to provide online businesses and sell whatever product they want online. Okay, so what vLaw does is they provide the bookkeeping, email, telephone, and organization software. To a large extent, they're a software and service amalgamator, and they give lawyers a chance to try practicing from home. And lawyers can, of course, choose to meet clients in a conference room or in a specific location through office sharing programs such as Regis or WeWork or Spaces or something like that. But it's the idea that the online tools for lawyers to practice can be done from the computer. And there's also a cybersecurity component and advisory with vLaw as well, which is important.
So just kind of leaving aside AI specifically for right now, speaking as a lawyer who's managing a virtual law firm, what other forms of like non-AI technology do you see really impacting legal practice right now?
Basically all. That's a strange question because actually I think long term AI is in fact going to affect it the most, or more specifically machine learning, which is the part of AI. But otherwise, all technology is affecting virtual practice, certainly virtual practice, in that, without email, without phone services, without the organization tracking systems, whether that be Clio or Easy Law, where without the electrification of a lot of the technologies, virtual practice wouldn't be possible at all. So every technology actually affects legal practice. I know I apologize if that's not such a helpful, precise answer, but every single technology and its enhancement can actually affect legal practice.
Yeah, I mean, like technology is central to legal practice, and I'll just kind of like maybe just add sort of a historical anecdote, which I think highlights both the importance of technology to legal practice, but also this, in a weird way, the sort of I don't want to say irrelevance, but maybe the sort of independence of legal practice from technological development. So just an anecdote I find is fascinating, which I don't may not resound with the audience, but I was an M&A lawyer at a big law firm, and when I was a lawyer, I mean, this was 10, 15 years ago, so it wasn't like the dark ages or anything, but we didn't have AI, but we had email, we had computers to type on, we had Blackberries to check our email, we had all that kind of stuff. So, it's like, it's a very, like being an M&A lawyer was a very digital profession, and that you're, typing agreements in word processors, you're emailing them, people are sending you back PDFs with their markups, not, very similar to what you do today. And I remember you would talk to senior partners sometimes, and they'd be like, oh, we used to do all of this on typewriters, and then we would like courier the documents across town. And I was like, oh, and I was just like, that sounds horrible. How like practice must have been so much different then. And they're like, no, it wasn't. Like the agreements are basically the same. The deal flow was the same. It's like, it was different on the margins, and that like you didn't get instantaneous emails from people, but like it was basically the same, like legal, like, they're like, I've been doing this for 40 years. Technology's changed, but the practice is not changed that much. So question mark, like, is that going to continue to be the path of legal practice going forward? Or is AI going to be like a much more revolutionary change? That's just kind of a question I would pose. But kind of moving back to what a lot of people have identified as the most revolutionary technological change occurring right now, which is AI. Nikki, how does your firm use AI?
We've experimented with several. I think not just myself as the managing lawyer, because I still run more legal practice, and my practice is more litigation based than transaction based or solicitor based. But we've experimented a little bit with Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, and not that I have a suspicion on a smaller scale, not that different from what Selena has done with experimentation, just looking at the different types of AI that's out there to see what can be done, and also choosing not to use it quite often, actually, especially from as you mentioned earlier, from a research point of view.
Do you see any opportunities or challenges of AI that are specific to a virtual first law firm, or do you think it's kind of the same for all law firms?
I think it's the same. I see lots of challenges and opportunities in legal practice from AI. But I actually think the challenges and opportunities, whether virtual or not virtual or hybrid, are actually the same.
Okay. And then the last thing I might ask you is, talking about AI as a means of providing legal services, talking about, virtual law firms as a platform for providing legal services. How do you see technology increasing access to legal services and access to justice more fundamentally?
That's a very, very good question. Can I take that question in two parts?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll take the first part, which is how can technology, I think, correct me if I'm rephrasing it wrong, how can technology allow wider access to legal services? Right. I don't know if the technology in and of itself, specifically AI, is going to give access to regular people, so client types people, more legal services. But what I think it can do is, I think we're all really lucky that Gerald's here, because something like Legal, for example, or any software will, by and large, I don't want to really repeat the point, the administrative part or the actual hard task of doing law will be made faster. So in that sense, many lawyers will be able to do the work faster, because it's usually two tiers to legal work. There's the part where you actually do the work, which means make the document, do the research, but fundamentally it's about making some kind of product and then thinking about the product again and arguing about it. So there'll be more time to allocate the second tier, because AI, if it's done correctly, will do the first tier. Can the legal profession itself actually increase people's access to the technology? Was that part of your question? Or
yeah, like, I mean, I get
sure.
so, I
No,
think
that's a great question. I think that is a great question. The legal profession as a whole, not so much. Some specific parts of the legal profession, profoundly. So there's a really important point that you mentioned earlier, which was that for legal research at present, a lot of the generic AI tools are very suspect and not very good. I think you were you generically referring to the more common ones like Gemini, GPT, Grok, or things like that? Does that
I mean,
make
I
does
would
that,
say like I use Chat
yeah,
GPT a lot, like just kind of in my
sure.
daily life, like most people. And I would say that's
Yeah,
not a great tool for legal research. But
I
I also
agree. I
find
fully agree.
the specialized legal tools, like I've demoed like the Westlaw tool,
Yeah,
trash, just terrible, like way worse than Chat GPT, just unbelievable.
really. I didn't know the Westlaw tool was that
So
bad.
avoid,
That's
yeah, but
interesting.
maybe I mean maybe they'll get
Wow.
better, but I've not been able to.
That's fascinating. I'm not sure why the Westlaw tool is that bad. That's surprising to
Because
me,
it's
but thanks
just
for
like
bringing
they're
it
like,
up.
oh AI, we
Wow.
got to get something out the door, and it sucks.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So probably not enough time given. So there is some segments of the legal profession who actually would dramatically be able to give bunch of technology, and specifically, ironically, even though apparently the product's really bad, Westlaw, Cosmolex, LexisNexis, and Canly are all the areas that could theoretically help with access. Because one of the reasons why ChatGPT is in itself is bad, I have no idea why Westlaw is bad. That's surprising to me, is because they don't a lot of the generic AI tools do not have access to the proprietary or subscription databases that actually are the primary sources for law. For example, ChatGPT cannot look at Canly. Okay, ChatGPT does not have access to Canly or a lot of actual places where the right
I
answers
actually
are.
didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah, they don't have
There's a lot.
access to a lot of primary sources of law. So, with that in mind, they will not be effective sources because the initial program. Now, they may have secondary access to Canly. If Canly puts something out to the
Yeah, I
public,
was saying,
or if
can't they just
some
scrape it off
lawyer's
the web
blog,
or?
exactly, if some lawyer's blog accurately predicts something,
Okay.
and then
Okay.
ChatGPT can pick up on that, absolutely. But without actually understanding, even though the scope is really wide, without understanding what precisely the scope of the AI product you're using is able to initially look at to create its inputs, it may not actually be a reliable tool at all because with AI, there's two tiers to it. There's the part where you have to input all the information in a database first. And for most things, it's mind-boggling. Well, humans can't keep up with the amount of information that's put in. But it's helpful if it's a more specific, singular focused task like ours, such as research, with a specific point, it's actually really good to know. Oh, okay, does the AI have access to the primary source specific database that I would normally want to look at, right? If you're legal researchers, does the AI have access to Canly as a whole is a really important question, right? Whether it's Westlaw or Lexis or any of those. And if the answer is no, that already tells you no matter what answer AI is going to give to me, it's probably not going to be reliable, no matter what machine learning system it's using, right? Whether it's generative, which or a language model, which ultimately means you correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the idea that the AI tries to guess what is the most correct answer based on the information it has access to. So if it doesn't initially have access to the right information, the right thing is very unlikely to come on top. In fact, almost impossible. So going back to how can the legal profession fix that? Basically, if those who have access to the primary source information are able to create a machine that's very easy to use, that then can get the right information out, then those parts of the profession, probably more in the research and maybe tech related, AI related departments, can make a product like that or help make a product like that. The access they give to the public to technology would be extraordinary. Now, I'm going to go to the second part of the question about the access to justice, which is very related. Yes, if the legal, right, part of the reason why the legal profession exists is partly because a lot of people, we spent 3 years in law school. We generally have a better sense of the law, even if we don't immediately know it. If you take an average person versus a lawyer, okay, here's a legal question that neither of them actually know. A lawyer, because practice area is different. The lawyer is going to learn it a lot faster because they've just had much more time engaged in law. So what happens with AI is if you do have a product that can reliably give the primary source information that's relevant at the time to someone, all of a sudden, a lot of people who weren't able to access legal information with ease would actually be able to access it more easily. But I think we're a long time from that because what I just discussed, the possibility of connecting the reliable first-hand information to a reliable machine that then gives output of information. And that takes a lot of gigabyte capacity. That takes a huge server capacity. That's going to take a team of programmers and legal advisors. So we are a long time from that coming. But theoretically, yes, it can help access to justice in theory. I hope that answer wasn't too long.
No, no, that was great. So yeah, I mean, like, I guess maybe to kind of summarize things, I mean, AI obviously super powerful tools for lawyers that will become only more important in the future.
Yeah,
But at the same time, use with caution. I think that's
yeah,
maybe
absolutely.
kind of the takeaway from that.
Yeah.
So we've got plenty of time left. We've made it through our prepared questions, and we have plenty of time for audience Q&A. So I think what I'll do is maybe just open it up to people in the audience and then also people online if they have questions. And we can spend the remaining time just fielding questions. So please feel free to ask anything that you would like to any or all of our panelists. And I guess I'll moderate. So yeah, go ahead. You maybe use your, I guess speak loudly, but then also use your desk mic, and then that'll pick up for the recording.
Please do, because I couldn't hear the question at
Oh,
all.
okay. Yeah, it's because of the camera that I'm not a super fan of the close-up. But as I guess so as coming in as a 1L, I was just curious on all the panelists' views on the moralization of AI. Like, do you find that the biggest obstacle to implementing AI in like schools and also in firms is this idea that AI is going to be this evil thing that's going to take over everything? It's going to change the whole profession. Or do you think it's more on the lack of tools on regulation?
So
I'd be happy to cover that one.
Feel free to jump in.
Okay. Yeah, from my perspective, I may have a different perspective than the others on the panel, appreciating that I am trying to sell the tool effectively. But what I've been finding that is most challenging is more so around how to use the AI effectively and how that nuanced approach is going to be effective today. And then as AI kind of improves, how that may change going forward. Because effectively, I don't think any firms or schools or anybody want the individuals to stop thinking at all, right? And there is this like psychological phenomenon where if you use ChatGPT in a certain way, you may not be firing the same critical thinking processes that you would before. So I think the biggest challenge is, where is that ROI, that return on investment for the AI technology? How can it be used effectively? And how can we use it to really enhance the ability of all the individuals within that institution or organization, as opposed to, create a bunch of challenging and hallucinated outputs and create, way more output than we would otherwise create, but the quality of that output may not be as high. So I think the challenging part is, how does implementation occur? So that would be my perspective on the most challenging piece.
Any other panelists want to comment on that?
Simply that I agree. I think it definitely would be more the latter, the hesitation. It's more about the regulating tools, and I think that's the real challenge right now.
Yeah, I would just add the same. I know the tools that Faskin had introduced, it took a while for them to vet them, and I think it just gives junior lawyers a bit more space to use critical thinking. Gerald, when he was touching on how his tool, you could use it to produce a bunch of convertible notes like that's great. When you have hundreds of investors and you have to duplicate them for each investor, that's tens of hours sometimes that you would spend on this one mundane task. So I think it's exciting that we get more time to, really use our critical thinking and work on things that we could be more passionate about. Mm-hmm.
Does this work?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you guys so much for coming and sharing your time with us. I just had a question about, we spoke earlier about ethics and professional challenges when it comes to law. And my thought process is that over the years, many different types of technology has probably been introduced to improve efficiencies and whatnot, like email or data aggregation. What kind of challenges are you seeing with AI that are similar to previous introductions of technology, and what challenges are different that are unique to this technology? Thank you.
I think for me, because it was introduced so early on in my legal practice, and a lot of my time was spent learning how to best use the AI. And, some of Professor Camden and some of the other panelists had touched on how, it's not good for legal research. And, sometimes you would ask it a simple question about the BCBCA, and then you realize that the provision that it told you to, go to doesn't actually exist. So you learn how to use it more efficiently. So for me now, instead of asking questions, just these one-off questions out of the blue about like pull this from the web, I would download, a securities or, this Securities Act or like a national instrument and actually upload that and then, be like summarize this provision. And then when you actually provide a document, it becomes more accurate. So just learning how to use it through experience.
Yeah, I would say, working at Gallons, I found that they had a ton of wonderful templates within their database system, which I think is kind of the traditional technology maybe that you're referring to. So, just these templates have a lot of information in them, and effectively, it's the lawyer's decision to decide whether or not the content within that template works for your given situation. So, I think in that way, AI is similar to the extent that it's creating an output that seems very viable, and then it's the lawyer's decision to apply those critical thinking skills to figure out whether or not that is applicable. And I find that how it maybe deviates from the technology is that if a template is provided by your law firm, there are a number of provisions you can probably put a lot of faith and confidence in, whereas whenever you're using AI, you may not be able to put that same type of confidence into what the output is. And I think the challenge there and how it deviates from a simple template is that you can get very bespoke in using AI, and it sounds quite good. But if you don't have the expertise, you can create a lot of output in a short period of time that can be quite detrimental. So I think that's kind of the challenging piece, and how AI is different from past technologies. Although I would say that it probably rhymes to some degree, because if you use a template in a law firm inappropriately, you're also creating an output that may not be appropriate as well, right? So, yeah, there are some similarities and some differences for sure.
Nikki?
I'm terribly sorry. It looked like a really good question, but I actually couldn't hear it. I'm not sure what that was. Could someone repeat or summarize the question for me? I'm really sorry.
Yeah. Sure. If I could paraphrase and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the question was about, given that AI is, a disruptive technology in the legal industry, how is it, if I'm paraphrasing correctly, like how is it different from or similar to past technological changes in the legal industry? In terms of its impacts on practice?
Great question. Well, I think we're in the early stages, so I think that same question would be in some ways more interesting, certainly from a historian's perspective, 10 years from now or 20 years from now. It's more erratic and much larger at the same time. AI as a historical, outside the legal area, AI could potentially be a technological development as significant as the internet, gunpowder, or the atomic bomb. It may be that significant, but especially gunpowder and the atomic bomb, people understand these things were very dangerous, detrimental things, that if the power is not harnessed correctly, people were grievously injured or die. And so, like the atomic ones being like some more concentration of nuclear energy. And AI is actually very similar right now, but in a much more benign way than the analogy I just made. It's on the surface, it makes the process of finding information so much more easier, so much more convenient. It's not possible that AI is not going to go away. And it's a much more ubiquitous technology. So if there's a way to really harness it correctly, partly by controlling the inputs of the initial information that the AI is able to look at. That right. I think a product like Legal probably is as a really good one. The more I listen to Gerald, the more interested I become in that product. Yeah, I think eventually it is quite disruptive and may drastically change the way the practice takes place. It won't take away practice, but it might change the way practice is done.
I guess I might add something. So this is kind of going off what some of the other or what some of the panelists have said, but then also kind of harkening back to a comment I made earlier. So I agree. I actually do think AI is at least a potentially revolutionary technology. But I want to talk about some of the ways I think it might be similar, at least right now, in terms of its impact on the legal industry to past technologies. So I gave the anecdote about how at big transactional practices, they used to type agreements on typewriters, and then they would do hand markups, and they would courier the markups back and forth across town, and that's sort of how you did deals, which is kind of hard to believe. But I think that the advent of digital technology and the advent of word processors and email and the ability to instantaneously edit and transmit documents back and forth, it didn't change the nature of legal practice that much, but it made it much more efficient, because before the advent of kind of basic digital technologies, lawyers would literally sit around at night waiting for the courier package to come so they could turn the document, right? So they'd spend like an hour or two just sitting there, and they were billing that time to the client. Similarly, if they were having to do a markup to turn a document back, they would be like standing over the shoulder of their secretary or something doing hand markups, and it was like really laborious, and they were billing all that time to their client, right? So the advent of digital technology didn't really change the substance of what they were doing. It just made them much more productive, right? And I think that AI is having that impact right now on lawyers. It's automating a lot of the really routine tasks that lawyers would otherwise be wasting time on. Like, so for example, like if you're a first-year associate, and Gerald was talking about making changes to templates, a lot of like first-year associate work is like you'll get like a template document from a partner, and then you have to like change all the names and dates or something like that. And if it's like a big agreement, that could take like 45 minutes or an hour. But with something like AI, I mean, that would all just be done instantaneously. So there's a lot of these kind of like very, very sort of non-lawyerly administrative functions, as Gerald put it, that are being automated. And that's just really increasing the efficiency of lawyers and making them more productive, which is a good thing. It means lawyers are doing more work better, more efficiently, which is good for lawyers. So I think things could change in the future, but I think right now we're on a trajectory where AI seems to be increasing the productivity of lawyers, at least lawyers that are doing high-level legal work. Lawyers that are doing like extremely routine legal work at kind of like the lower end of maybe like the lower end of the legal economy, I think they might be in more trouble because some of that work can probably be purely automated. But certainly lawyers that are doing high-level work, I think AI is helpful, not hurtful.
And Cameron, maybe I could just add to that with an anecdote I heard from a senior lawyer. He mentioned that he had remembered whenever they started redlining documents electronically as opposed to manually, because they used to literally take a pen and mark out the document and then rewrite the word. And he said back in those days you would do 2 or 3 turns of the document, and now because red lines are a lot more productive and efficient, you have the time for 5 or 6 turns of the document, and maybe you get a little bit more negotiation involved. So to your point, you're spending less time doing the stuff that's not so important and spending more time actually advocating for your client or figuring out the solution.
And back.
Thank you. Good job, Camden. Thanks for the talk today. It's excellent presentations. I'm Roderick Lewis. My questions are for Nikki and for Gerald. The first one is, what would you foresee are the likely improvements to your products, the tools that you both either have created or oversee? So in the coming years, what do you foresee as the improvements in capacity and abilities, and what are needed, ideally, but may never come to fruition? And secondly, if possible, are there competitors in common law practicing countries to your products? Do you have much competition that exists, and do you foresee that there will be other companies similar to yours becoming competitors in the future?
Yeah. So, Nikki, would you like to just kick it off?
Sure. Great questions. I appreciate that. So the question two, but one was, how is the technology making our product or services better? Well, I think it's that by being able to do.
No, that's,
Sorry?
I'm asking, what do
Yeah.
you foresee as improvements in capabilities to your products, and what do you foresee or currently as what is needed? What would make your products better that you currently can't do or don't do as well as you would like? So what is needed? It may not happen, but in terms of the capabilities of your products, what would you ideally like them to be able to do better than they currently do? And
Sure. Speed and accuracy, right? There's something called hallucination, which probably we're all aware of, where AI simply makes things up. And part of why it ends up making things up is because it looks at whatever material it has available and predicts what the right answer is based on what material has access to. So if it doesn't have the right primary source it needs to come up with the right answer, it will hallucinate and it's going to make things up. Whereas citation that they say, hey, check this, and when you look at it, it's not even relevant to what you're looking for. That's a type of hallucination. So an absence of hallucinations, which are basically the complete opposite of accuracy, a more concentration of data, and that's essentially what it would need, because AI is already giving us extraordinary speed at potentially getting an answer, but it's the accuracy piece that's really needed for it to improve. As for the second part of the question, the competitors, interestingly enough, I don't know anyone who's precisely trying to make a Shopify-like subscription platform for lawyers in common law jurisdictions. There are some firms that are allowing remote work, and there is another firm that does remote law that tries to do all the work remotely, but they are still a traditional firm where they're trying to just allow remote work. But I don't know of any corporation like VLaw that's trying to simply offer the tools to different law firms to see if that would be useful for them. That may appear in the future, though. It wouldn't surprise me if in the future there's more of them.
Yeah, I'd be happy to take it from there, but Nick, you don't let me interrupt you, of course.
Oh, no, go ahead. That's everything. Yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate the question. Very thoughtful question. It's something that our team is talking about constantly, is effectively where the improvements are coming naturally and what can we influence to further enhance those improvements. So to Nikki's point, it is the reliability component for the most part. I think that LLMs generally are getting better and better all the time. Although I'm seeing with recent studies that perhaps they're reaching a plateau to some degree, although essentially the tech conglomerates would suggest that is not the case. So I guess we'll see what happens there. So the reliability has been improving naturally. And I think it's important to design your tools from an AI perspective anyway, so that you can benefit from those natural improvements. And the way that we've designed our tools is that we do use the large LLMs that are naturally improving constantly. But then we have a bunch of proprietary technology that is built around those, that includes layers and layers of software and configuration to produce more reliability again. So to Nikki's point earlier about inputs and outputs, what improves our tool the most is whenever we can work very collaboratively with a firm and an expert within that firm to train the AI to make the decisions the way that that expert makes those decisions. So we are seeing those improvements naturally. And where I would like to see further improvement, and I think we're already headed in this direction, is that law firms have knowledge management teams. Some of the larger firms do. And some of the smaller and medium-sized firms are employing more individuals that are doing knowledge management and legal operations. And those teams are very well positioned to help us create a better output for our clients. So to the extent that they have a number of templates and they have a bunch of essentially decision trees and experts within a specific vertical that they're willing to give us access to so we can train our AI based on all of those things, the better that output is. So quick summary is, yeah, the improvements we are seeing on the reliability side, although they're not where we want them to be. And what can be done is having the firms and lawyers think about knowledge management just to a greater extent, which they're already doing quite substantially. And then as it relates to competitors, I would consider that we do have competitors. I feel like the legal tech sector is quite busy. I think LLMs have captured the imagination of a lot of legal tech founders and lawyers alike. And as a result, it seems as though right now the industry is quite bifurcated in a bunch of different areas. And we're all trying to solve the problem of making the lawyer's life better effectively, but we're all taking different approaches to that. I think most commonly is the tool that is available that effectively reads the document and then provides responses using the LLM as a backdrop. Now, where our tool is different is we're training the tool to make the decisions based on what the lawyer wants as opposed to what the LLM is suggesting. So I appreciate that there are certainly probably competitors out there. I know of one called Avocat that is doing something somewhat similar to us. And then there are other companies like Harvey who have raised billions of dollars at a massive valuation. I think they're more focused on like a ChatGPT research and then workflow automation. I haven't seen them come out with a tool exactly like ours. Having said, I think they most recently raised a very substantial round, and they discussed potentially putting something together like what we're creating. So I would say that we've carved out a niche, but I'm sure that there will be competitors going forward more prominently. And effectively, some of the individuals that we're working with are working with the largest AI companies, not just in law, but in the world. And they're spending a lot of time thinking about how tools can help with effective coding and whatnot. And we see legal work is somewhat similar to that to the extent that there is kind of a specific legal language that is used, and they're getting better and better at that all the time. And we're thinking a lot about how we can create a very unique user interface that essentially does all the automation that the AI is good at, but then essentially taps in the lawyer whenever required for items that they aren't so good at. And you would be very surprised to hear what the AI is good at and what it's not if you're not familiar with it already. Because things that seem very simplistic, it's actually not very good at, where other things that seem quite complex, it's actually surprisingly good at. So there are a lot of competitors, in short, and we are carving out our own niche, but it seems as though we're all trying to solve a somewhat similar problem. And I suspect we'll all converge to a similar place, in 10 years from now.
Is it typed out or they?
It's just, have you guys started use this?
Have you guys started seeing terms related to the use of AI in M&A agreements, commercial agreements, or retainers? So less the use of AI, more if the terminology has been included in these agreements.
I personally have not seen it in an agreement yet, but in like continuous disclosure documents for our public company clients, we've been, adding those to, risk factors, about, what happened, the information that's being inputted in the client's software, for example, what would happen if there's data leakage, things like that. But not in an agreement.
And yeah, I mean, I have just because of the nature of the work that I do, I've seen it in a number of retainers. Essentially, we work with clients that use AI tools, and as a result, we do work with them to help them refine their retainer to what we've seen in the industry to help mitigate that risk to some degree. So very much in retainers, certainly. Commercial agreements, to Sabrina's point, and M&A agreements, not so much unless the M&A agreement or the commercial agreement, the subject matter is AI or software to some degree. But I would agree with her that I'm not seeing that reference unless the subject matter kind of merits it.
I've also seen it in retainer agreements in some agreements.
Any other questions in person or online? Okay, well that about, oh, we got one. Yeah, we got time for one more question. Yeah, go for it.
Right. I think my question is for Sabrina. It seems like you're a securities lawyer. So there was this CSA notice 11348. I want to say like the Canadian Securities Administrators have a guidance on how you should use AI and disclose it. How do you see going forward it will impact the work of a securities lawyer in terms of disclosure?
That's a really interesting question. I think that the disclosure that we have to provide is pretty comprehensive in all aspects. And if AI is being used, I think it's important for companies to disclose that too. So we're already seeing it in, clients' continuous disclosure documents and, as part of, like, as I mentioned a few times, the risk factors that there's a pretty comprehensive disclosure for how investors will be impacted if, something goes awry with AI. So I can see that being added onto. I don't think that disclosure is going to become like less important. I think clients will want to just provide as much information as they can so that all their bases are covered.
Great, thank you. So that is just about our allotted time. So why don't we end there? Thank you very much on behalf of the Center for Business Law to our three panelists. Let's give them a round of applause. So for the two panelists online, if you didn't hear, that was a very robust round of applause. And thank you everyone for coming.